Hey everybody, it's Frost Thief here, back from retirement, and as some of you may know, I deleted the channel. I basically left the content creator space, and I truthfully do not plan on posting many more videos, especially not of this nature. I might end up posting one or two more in the future, but this specific video is very close to my heart. I am very excited about the newest character release, Vortici. And just this unit in general has stirred so much thoughts and brain power that I really want to just get everything out there to y'all. So I'm just gonna move her over here so during the course of the video we can look at her. I'll put her over here on the side actually. And just remember why we're doing this basically. And I think her kit was just released today. I think it's very fascinating. And it's been going through my mind. I've not been able to get it out of my head basically since I woke up today and read it for the first time. She's so fascinating to me as a unit. And I just wanted basically to share my thoughts with all of you to maybe help gather them into one place by making this video. And in general, maybe we'll break the character, we'll figure something out, and who knows. And so the first thing we need to do, obviously, is get an understanding of what is her kit. And so I have that pulled up right here for y'all. And as you can see, she has relatively normal stats. She is a DPS unit, so she is not a support, which is very interesting for a lot of the things I will talk about. One of them is actually in front of you right now, the Psyche Surge. But the con, the defense, I think her attack is better than 24's is, for example, but so while her stats might be a little on the high side, they're very normal stats as well. The weird one here is the base Alamus. This is the first time, as far as I'm aware, that they are even clarifying the base Alamus on the unit, because she's the first unit that has increased base Alamus. What does that mean? Her Exalt cost is 200 instead of the normal 100. So it costs 400 to over-exalt her. Which is an absurd cost. Already the 200 base Alamus is an absurd cost. So getting up to her Exalt is very, very big. And we'll have a better understanding of why this is later. But basically, this either makes or breaks the character, really. This is such a significant factor into how everything around her else is built, that if it turns out you cannot charge her efficiently, she's just dead in the water. Unfortunately, she drowned basically. Even fish can drown. That's her little tagline or something that they introduced her with. It was kind of cute. But fascinating thing about her is that she is the game's first true Realm Mastery scaler. We've had units in the past that have Realm Mastery buffs. For example, Tawil has Realm Mastery as part of her scaling. We have units who synergize with Realm Mastery, the Divine A-Core, any pure Caro team, basically. But she's the first true RM scaler since, Lei. So that's really interesting to have on Unlimited, and that's really cool in general. It's really fascinating that they chose Keyflare, of all things, as her secondary, almost as if they were, maybe hoping she could take on a more supportive role at times, but kind of doesn't really work is the issue, which makes her so weird. Anyways, the talents are really what makes this interesting, because she is a Divine Realm unit. She is the second after D Murphy, and presumably Tulu is going to be the third, unless the A-Core unit that I suspect we're going to get between the two is one. But so far, there are only two Divine Realm units. If you include Vortici, Vortex, I'm going to be referring to her interchangeably between the two, just basically whatever I instinctually go to at the time. But Vortici is the second Divine Realm unit. So let's just do a quick refresher on what Divine Realm is. Divine Realm doesn't really affect blue stance too much. Not that I remember, at least. It makes your white stance be much more powerful. It gives you much more shield when you white stance. And it greatly increases the amount of bonus tentacle damage multiplier you get from red stance. So while in normal red stance is like 0.02, I believe in Divine Realm it's like 0.2, scaling with Realm Mastery. I don't remember the exact numbers. Forgive me, I'm not a numbers guy. Any specific number that is discussed here is either going to be hearsay or literally on the screen. Or something I wrote down. So, with that in mind, what does this mean for us? It means Alamus charge isn't that important. And because while you do have to get to 200, you don't have to get up to 200 every turn. You just have to get up to 200 every 3 turns. Which automatically makes her a much more viable unit to work with. For the other thing, I believe this is her Arc 2 talent. I think that's what they mean by chapter talent. That's why it's called the Soulforge aptitude, because it's tied to her Soulforge. It increases the base fixed damage of her Exalt. No, not her Exalt, of one of her abilities. Let me check one more time. Oh, of her Pursuit. So she does have a Pursuit like Michelle. I will get into it. I don't think it's actually too important to the rest of her kit, but it is a nice little bonus. And then she also, when she Exalts, and specifically before the Exalt does damage, that's what effects that say before Unleashing Exalt means. It means that they affect the Exalt itself, while most effects will trigger after an Exalt's effects have been concluded. She just removes all Fortress from an enemy temporarily. Well, I believe it's actually permanent removal, just from the way it's phrased. But she just, like, kills Fortress, which is really funny, actually, if you think about it. Because imagine, like, a D-Tide with Aisha, for example. She just dies. Because her whole thing is 80% Fortress, and then this just gets rid of it. So it's kind of funny what she does there. But anyways. All that's, like, cute, but I don't think it's too important. This is the important part. Abyssal Vortex Cannon. So, a very similar vibe to, like, the Shining Tornado of Michelle. I'm probably going to compare it to Michelle a lot during this discussion. Michelle, G. Murphy, or Murphy Foborn, and Dorsane. Of the units I'm going to reference, those are probably going to be my 3 go-tos, and you'll understand better why during the course of the discussion. So, Abyssal Vortex Cannon. First thing, dispels all burn effects in hand. So she's the second, like, burn unit in the game. The other one is Cath. I don't believe Cath's Soulforge actually works. It says that it cleanses it, but, like, I don't know if it actually does. Because I'm pretty sure the cards get exhausted anyways. But anyways, she's the second. And it doesn't matter. There are like 3 fights in the game where your cards burn. It's Cath boss, Liz boss, which is the current D-type boss. And like Cath side story event. Like this effect is only going to matter if Chapter 5 enemies have burn effects. But burn is not that brutal of a card effect. It just means you take a little bit of damage when you play the card. So, realistically, this aspect of the XL doesn't matter and will not be discussed any further from this point on. So, then she deals damage equal to 750% tentacle damage to all enemies one time. I believe this is the same wording as 24. So, 24 will do a percentage of damage equal to 900% tentacle damage bonus. And you can use that to stack up a lot of poison damage on enemies. And so I do know that this number in itself is already decently high damage-wise. Although, truthfully, it's not as high as I would like. And it does lead into some small concerns that I will be discussing in the future. But anyways, so she does twice that much damage. Or twice as much total damage, I should say. I don't know exactly how the math works. To the highest HP enemy. So for elites that summon mobs, for bosses, or just for regular mob fights. You know, where sometimes you have that one 30k HP enemy, and then you have the other one with 50k. She's really good in all those instances. So that's actually really cool. And then you can also sacrifice up to 3 additional permanent tentacles to increase the Exalt's crit damage by 50%. So this is our first tentacle consuming unit in the game, which is also fascinating. Now, I don't think anyone ever confirmed it with the devs, but I think it's safe to assume that this will not delete... If you only have one tentacle, it won't delete any tentacles. Because, like, if you're in red stance. However, we have to see in game for like how exactly this works. But it's not too big of a concern depending on how it works, as long as it doesn't take you out of red stance, which is very unlikely to be programmed into the game. It won't matter too much. It's not that big a deal. So for her Rouse, the most important part of her Rouse, honestly, is the 50 Alamus, because as we discussed earlier, she needs 200 to Exalt, and what we're going to learn is that this is everything. Her entire kit is built around this Exalt. She is an Exalt spamming unit. She is the Dorasane and Sorel of Acor. She is literally, in my opinion, the first good Exalt spamming unit. Well, DPS, I would say. First good Exalt spamming DPS. I think she's better than Dora. I think she's better than Sorel. But, yeah, so you have the 50 Alamus, and it's a 2 cost, so that's really good. There have been some recent examples like Zhu, Dorasane, well, you have a 3 cost Rouse, and as the game has developed, we've basically gotten to this point where a 3 cost Rouse is unplayable. Like, it's so unreasonable to play a 3 cost Rouse. It only works for Zhu because it makes her cards free, and then she also charges a 3 Aerith thing, so it's basically free entirely. And even then, it's like hard to cast, so a 2 cost Rouse is very much more reasonable. G Murphy Rouse is 2 cost, no one complains about it. Mouche Rouse is 2 cost, no one complains about it. So this is very nice. A 1 cost Rouse is obviously very broken, and there's not been a 0 cost Rouse in the game, outside of, say, Miriam, but that one doesn't count. And so, so her Rouse draws this 2 cost card, her Reload, and then it also, every time she unleashes Pursuit, her Exalt gains a 150% tentacle damage bonus. So that's actually kind of cool. Because what it means is that the tentacle damage bonus is equal to the 24 damage bonus after triggering 1 Pursue effect. I'll tell you how she triggers Pursue. It's different from Mouche when I get to the whole reload card, but genuinely, while these are really nice, I don't think it's too important to her kit overall, and the Alamus is more important. This card, however, is one of the most broken cards in the game and very important to her kit. Vortex gains 75 Alamus. For context, one of like the next biggest ones are G Murphy's Face Descent that gives 50, and the Chosen on Miriam that gives 50. Plus blah 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 blah, and like on Mouche the DPS is her like 3 cost that gives her 30. So 75 is massive, and it really helps for getting to that percentage where you're able to Exalt with her, because you still need to charge up 200, right? This plus this is only 125. And then it also gives her crit rate 35% crit rate. Okay, I'm sorry. It gives her Exalt 35% crit rate. That is actually very important. Because this unit cares so much about Exalt, and it's really hard to like do it multiple times in a fight thanks to the Alamus cost, this crit rate matters so much. this single-handedly like makes her a viable character because it allows you to get up to 100% crit rate on her exalt basically for free with like very minimal effort. Even if your only sources of Alamus basically are Rouse and then 2 of these charges, you have 70% exalt crit rate. So 75% with base crit rate. And then if you have literally no other source of crit rate in the game, which is, I'm going to get to why that's not going to be the case in a minute. But if you have no other source of crit rate, you have a 3/4 chance of critting with her exalt. So that's already great for the damage. And then a, generally speaking, useless Aftershock because it's so important to play the card. This is nice if you're playing her in a more supportive build, which I can discuss later to a minor degree. I'll probably mention it more so in passing. But I do believe she is a potentially viable support, although the 200 Alamus cap does make her playing her as one to be, let's just call it unfavorable. I really don't like the idea of playing her as a support. Anyway, so now we have this card, the reload card, which I don't think is too important, honestly. But it gives her 1 stack of an effect called Vortex Reload. So she's also been given her own unique mechanic. Everyone gets a unique mechanic these days. She has her Spellbound, which technically had a unique mechanic in her pursuits, but now she's no longer unique in that sense. Anyways, so it gives you a stack of a buff that when a different Awakener, so not Vortex, when a different Awakener releases their Exalt, she basically shoots it out, right? So she's like charges the gun and then fires it. And it triggers a pursuit that does, well, 5,400 fixed damage, and then increases her tentacle damage a little bit. I'll be honest, don't know how I feel about this. I'm gonna assume this is like just the raw number. Like it's only gonna deal 5,400 damage. So honestly, I don't think it's gonna be very important. Oh, and then this part of text basically just says, instead of retain, we get a new keyword called affix. Or rather, affix is like prepare, where it's a keyword that has retain within it. But basically all this says is that this card's not going to go away out of hand until you've played it multiple times. It's not that big a deal. So yeah, I'm going to assume that this is the amount of damage it's going to do. And so therefore I don't think the pursuit's very viable at all, because 5,000 damage once after an Exalt released when your enemies have like 30k health just doesn't matter. And then you have her Strike and Defend. Pretty standard, right? Deals a little bit of damage, gives you a little bit of shield, gives you 10 Alamus. She does have a Enlighten that affects them, though, but, so these are actually going to be decent cards. Anyways, as for her Enlightens go, we have her Enlighten 1. Kind of cute how they are doing, like, the stars now for the Enlightens. But they have the Enlighten 1, which is the Pursuit does a additional % of the target's max HP. Again, not a significant amount of damage, 0.5%. Doesn't really matter too much, right? But we get plus 50 Realm Mastery, presumably for the fight. That's normally how these types of effects go. After using her Exalt. So that's not going to matter for most fights. That's only going to come up in boss fights. But for now, not really too worried about it. At least as far as my understanding of the character goes. This Enlightened ones, at least this bit of effects don't matter. And then for the last part, it's what we've been getting in a lot of units recently with the Mache and Jews and all that, and it's probably just going to be the standard going forward, is that for every point of X stat for her Realm Mastery that she specifically possesses, so that she is literally holding, her Pursuit deals extra fixed damage equal to, again, not a lot of damage. And, also, a bit of a nice thing, increases the Realm Mastery that she gains a tiny bit more. I, once again, do not think this Enlighten is very important. That isn't to say she doesn't need any enlightens. That is to say this specific one I don't think is going to be extremely relevant for how her kit plays out. The next two are the ones that matter. So her Enlighten 2 is that her strikes and defense give crit rates and reduce the cost of the 2-cost card by 1. So this doesn't say up to on it. So I'm going to assume they stack infinitely. And, sorry, what do I mean by that? I think it means that you can make her 2-cost card cost 0 if you play a strike word and a defense, and that you get the crit rate up by 20% once again if you play a strike and a defense. And that's, one rotation of your deck. So second rotation of the deck, it's then 40% crit rate, and you've reduced the cost by 2 again, right? So this is going to be really strong for the setting up, especially that crit rate by 10%, and that's really, like, what I care about. Is that now we have a character that, with a single rotation of the deck, where you have the 2 3-cost cards, and then playing a strike and defense, just like one of each, you have 95% crit rate. And I'm of the opinion that in this game, 95% is 100%. 5% misses do happen. It's not at such a degree that, it's probability. You don't worry about that last 5% very often. But if that's not enough to convince you that she has 100% crit rate, I have done a bit of math, and yeah, she basically has 100% crit rate all the time. So her Enlighten 3, which is a really strong one, is her Exalt, the Abyssal Vortex Cannon, deals 3x damage instead of the 2x to the highest HP enemy. So if she was doing 30k damage flat, then she does 90k to the biggest mob. And with those numbers that I just mentioned, you basically you kill the first mob wave in wave 5, A5, instantly. So that's really cool. That's a little neat thing. And then the next part, which is cute and nice and helpful and cool, but not as important. For every 20 Alamus spent, other Winkers gain 1 Alamus. So this is probably one of the big reasons why her base Alamus is so high. Because when you Exalt with her, you're giving your team 10 Alamus. And that's just good. Like, there's not much more to be said about it. That's just a strong effect. 10 Alamus to the team is good. Sorry, I thought I'd sneeze. I did. And then her Oversalt, I'll be honest, doesn't matter. You're not charging 400 Alamus. I'm not charging 400 Alamus, okay? So, that's your kit. I will have it on the screen to be referenced as we discuss. I might take it off the screen, though, just in case later. And then the other big thing is her wheel. So a lot of players were hoping that the wheel wouldn't be mandatory. Whenever a new character comes out, that's always the hope for a lot of players. But she cares about Realm Mastery a lot, as we've kind of shown, basically, with her being a Divine Realm unit and such. She scales Realm Mastery up a lot. But that's not why this is we actually require this. It's because what it does is that it gives her 25% of her base Alamus, which means for her it's 50. That's 10 Alamus better than 2 the wheel. Specifically only on Vortex, but it is 50 Alamus, and it's at the start of every battle, so it's literally the way 2 the wheel works. So just that alone is enough to be played on the character, because that will fix a lot of the charging issues. Because now we have 50 Alamus from the Rouse, 50 Alamus from the wheel, and then 75 Alamus from her card. That is 175 Alamus. Well, the first fight is the hardest to charge Alamus in. If you have 5 levels of Madness, That's 25 Alamus. That's 200. Boom, right at the bat, with only 5 Aerith spent to get up there. 5 Aerith and 2 cards. One of which is guaranteed to be in your opening hand. So, surprisingly easy to charge a 200 Alamus Exalt in this game. Helps when you have a card that gives you 75. What it also does, though, because for some reason it does more, her Exalt final damage increases by 40% pace Alamus. Oh, by 40%. What the fuck? Final damage multipliers are considered very powerful in this game, very premium. Everyone loves Horla for her 20% final damage multiplier. This is double that. This is literally double that. On a wheel. And when you switch to Raging Waves, when you switch to Red Stance, you get 35% of your current Realm Mastery as a bonus as well. Which is also really good. Because it means your damage also spikes a little bit there. So, with this in mind, that Exalt defers, in theory, is dishing out, like, well, I can't put a number to it, but let's just say a lot of damage. I could just take it off screen, but I don't feel like it. Because it truly isn't important for the rest of the conversation, but yeah, just keep in mind that, like, that wheel is just best in slot, no questions asked. Cannot debate that. Anyways. So that is Vortice's game. What does this mean? It means our girl right here. Fuck. Okay. Our girl right here is, at a glance, with potential, right? All these modifiers, because this is only theory talk. The best Exalt unit in the game. I believe Vortice to be the best unit for Exalting in the game. And so that is going to be, means that anyone who generates a lot of Alamus for the team, any battery unit, is going to be a premium slot for her. That other characters like Dorsan or Sorrel, who normally take up that niche, are just worse. I think she's very comparable to Mouche, except for the fact that where Mouche just does her thing no matter who is on the team, she does it despite who's on the team. Well, she does it with the help of others. She requires more assistance. In exchange, you get these much more absurd bursts. Now, you might have noticed, from my discussion, what I've talked about, is that her kit has a lot of restrictions to it. Right? She's A-core, so obviously she has to have, like, weaker mechanics. Now, what are those weaker mechanics? Well, her Exalt consumes tentacles, right? So that's going to be the first one we have to look into, is that she doesn't have any tentacle generation of her own, but she wants to eat tentacles created by other teammates, specifically permanent tentacles. Permanent tentacles are a lot harder to get than temporary tentacles. Because with temporary tentacles, you do have things like a Murphy image, like Murphy Rouse and stuff. Or like Corpo Exalt. But permanent tentacles are a larger challenge. There's not a lot of effects that generate tentacles in this game. But, as I mentioned with Corpo, there are a few. And that would be, for example, Corposant's Overexalt. And what does it say? Oh, obtain 3 tentacles. So, Corposant, at a glance, to me, is already a very strong support unit for Vortex, Vortice. There is more to it than that, but if you can overexalt Corposant, you know, the unit that has the ominous semaphore that gives her 30 Alamus when fully leveled, which it is now, the defenses and the strikes that give 15 base Alamus that goes up when you discard them, and it goes up to like 34-5 in theory, but you don't really get up that high. You usually play it for like 24 or so. So you have this unit that is really good at charging her own Exalt, and can very easily herself get up to 200. Well, what does her Exalt even do? It gives her the tentacles, which we already know is going to be really good, and it also applies vulnerability to the whole team. So this unit solves two questions that we might ask ourselves. One, how do we get debuffs? Because Acor's biggest weakness a lot of times is applying debuffs to enemies. We don't have Horla, who just have all the cards in hand all the time, or say Dahl or Riker, in our realms, right? But we have Coruscant that is really good at doing it. Her Exalt does the Vuln, and her cards give the weakness. And so you play her with Dreams, and boom. And so, if you set up a turn where you over-exalt Coruscant into exalting Vortex, you're just dishing out an insanely high damage first, with the 150% crit damage bonus on the Vortex Exalt. Since I've shown you so much damage modifiers on her kit already, I think it's safe to assume that we don't need that much damage for mobs. Which means we don't need to charge up Coruscant that much for mobs. Which means you only really need her, say, base Exalt to apply the Vuln. Now there's other considerations, right? Tulu is another unit to think about here. Tulu Exalt also gives a tentacle. It's only one tentacle, but it's whenever he exalts. And so that already is a source for red stance in Divine Realm, because Divine Realm doesn't have a starting tentacle. That is the biggest weakness with Divine Realm Acor, is that you do not start with a tentacle. Bit unfortunate, but that's how the devs program the game. And then with the temporary strength buff, it means you're getting a better multiplier on her damage, because it's 900% of the tentacle damage. So this is how you get high tentacle damage. And then you also get 25% temporary crit rate if you Tulu Exalt. And so as we discussed earlier, it's very easy to get up to 75% crit rate. And then with and then you have 25% from Tulu, and that instantly solves any crit rate problem. And I'll actually getting into more depth on the math related to that. And so other considerations for teammates would be Miriam. Miriam Rouse does all the vulnerable weaknesses. Miriam Rouse gives you a tentacle. Miriam has the Chosen, which gives you the Alamus. Miriam's Exalt creates the Sacraments that you can use with the Chosen to get even more Alamus. And her Overexalt generates more tentacles. So, in boss fights, for example, where you're wanting to rouse Miriam for all the random bullshit effects you want, you are also just generating a lot of tentacles. Another unit, and the last one we'll discuss for this section, that is really good at generating tentacles, is everyone's favorite character, G. Murphy. G. Murphy, 3-cost Watts, generates a tentacle every time you play it. So with that in mind, and the fact that G. Murphy's already puts you in Divine Stance, and that she has the Abyss Hymn, which will solve a lot of your Aerith problems that you might run into, having to play all these 3-cost effects, basically. If you are a bit of a budget player, right, the Overexalt on this unit doesn't matter. The Overexalt on G. Murphy no longer matters, because she's here as a support. You have already a viable team, in my opinion, with just these two units. At E3, Enlightened 3. And then you can just run whatever you think you are lacking in that's the rest of the places. For example, an E3 or E2 Coruscant if you like. Or say a Murphy who has all the debuffs plus is defense. Provides a lot of defensive utility. I will be discussing more about her soon. Maybe you want Celeste because you think you're going to die a lot. Like, I genuinely believe this unit is the most budget-friendly A-core unit basically ever released. She's not like me, where you need to have every unit you need to have everything at plus 12 for her to function. No, I genuinely believe that she will be the first unit for an A-core team that doesn't require a single over-exalt to even look pretty. Because I don't think any of her teammates actually require any. Now, we discussed it a little bit before previously, but that's the technical problem solved, right? And like I said, it's probably like the least relevant of her problems. Next, we have the Alamus problem we have to solve. So for that, we have Miriam. I mentioned her earlier, right? So I don't think I'm going to go deeper into that, but, you know, the Chosen card is really good for charging at Alamus. Who would have thought? Celeste, as I mentioned earlier, actually does help with Alamus, because when you trigger the Celeste passive, and so if you truly don't think you have a lot of damage, you can trigger the Celeste passive with damage, you know, if you think the fight's going to go too long. And that charges, I want to say 25 Alamus for the team. Yeah. Grants all Awakeners 25 Alamus. Which is not a lot, but there are other units in this game. For example, the Karo Run, right? We have Pikmin. We have Thighs. These two units generate so many embryos. So many. And technically Zhu, but the team just doesn't work really. That's not really, I think, a viable combination, but these two units generate a lot of Alamus. And Pigment, and they also have other advantages, they both being debuffers in of themselves. So if you're able to run one of these units, then not only are you solving Alamus issues, you're solving a lot of the supportive issues. Thighs and Pikmin, especially uniquely, are able to generate cards. Most units, if they're generating cards, they're generating their own cards, but these two generate other units' cards. And so that major card, like 3-cost card that our entire kit is basically built around, they're able to double, triple it up. And so with Thighs, you don't even need any crit rate ever, because you use her Exalt and you play the card 3 times, you have gained a 225 Alamus. Oh wow, your Exalt's fully charged, and you've gained 105% crit rate for the Exalt. So really, you probably won't have to play it 3 times, but you can play it twice. And if you play it twice, it's only 2 Aerith off of the Thighs Exalt, of course. And if Thighs Devoured, well, gives you more Alamus. Cleans up that last few amount that you're trying to get up to, right? So these two insane units, in general, they're pretty strong. Everyone knows Thighs is really good. Pikmin is a bit more niche, generally speaking, but Pikmin on this team can really shine, if you think, more so than usual, because normally he's trapped on a much weaker team, for example, Sorel or Dorsane. And I believe this woman just power creeps most of them out of the water. And then, like, there is Chaos considerations. Doll, I think, is a better choice than G-Doll, actually. G-Doll's more of a poison unit, and she does give decent Alamus to the team. But Doll has 2 turns of weakness, a bunch of mechanics you can basically ignore, and then if you just, like, stack her with, like, certain wheels, for example, her own wheel, that gives all Awakeners 8 Alamus, and then this one right here, Judy's Gravitas, which is a Realm Mastery wheel. Realm Mastery good. Plus 5 more, so that's 13. She does give a decent amount. I do think she's, like, probably your worst choice for trying to gain Alamus, since she's more, like, wide. Trying to go vertical. And who better for vertical Alamus generation than Winkle? The unit in the game whose Exalt is just gives 50 Alamus to a teammate, right? So she alone can give you a quarter of your Alamus back instantly. And I will not be upgrading her, because I will not be playing with her. If you know anything about me, you know I do my best to build comps without these two realms, the Card and Ultra realm. Anyways, I'm gonna put the eye candy back on the screen for a second. And then, so, there's one more unit I want to think about for this part, and for a lot of sections. Ramona and Ramona Timeswarm. These two are very interesting. So regular Ramona has this Enlightenment, this Exalt, where she can grab the 3-cost card and then make it 0 cost. Which is fascinating. Of course, the issue there is that you have to charge her Exalt. And already we're barely charging 1 Exalt, so having to charge a second is kind of difficult. Despite all the potential Exalt Alamus sources we have on the team. But, honestly, just spending the 3 Aerith to cast a spell normally works anyways. However, there's also Genesis Ramona in this game. And Genesis Ramona, despite the rest of her kit being kind of useless for what we're going for, has Sight Unbound. And Sight Unbound is a 2-cost card that draws the card from your deck. And that matters. Because when it's a 2-cost card that draws it, it means you don't have to wait for the Exalt to charge, even though you are basically taxing yourself 1 more Aerith. So, depending on your opening hands, the Ramona Timeswarm can be very powerful. And I have not made my decision yet on which of the 2 units I prefer for the team that I plan on building. I will show other team variations based off the units I talk about and why I think they're good. But Ramona is definitely very interesting. And so, as I discussed earlier, I'm going to do a recap. Wheel, 50 Alamus. Cards, 75 Alamus, 50 Alamus, 125 Alamus, 175 Alamus. You see how the math works. Add. And then level 5 Madness is going to give you 200 for the first fight. Boom, first fight solved. First fight is normally the hardest fight in the game. Or, boom, 20 Alamus here from these 2 cards. Plus, just one fucking... Sorry, I try not to swear. Just one Madness Omen. One Madness Omen level is 22 level mats and 100,000 roughly Rose script. That's super cheap. That's nothing. And you can put that on any amount of units in the game and not be starving, really. Not unless you're a very new player. And so we were relying on a single hit Exalt to win with this girl, Vortice. And so we do need to figure out crit rate right away. And I've discussed it a little bit, but every unit has 5% crit rate base. So we only have to add up to 95%. To do that, there's a couple ways. Well, there is in fact just a wheel in the game that it doesn't really tell you here because it's the E0 version, but at E3 gives your Exalt 15% crit rate. And it also gives it bonus crit damage. So this already is a pretty solid choice for her, despite the rest of the text being almost if not entirely useless. But that's 15% crit rate. So already we're at 20% crit rate. As I mentioned earlier, if we're running Tulu, we have an extra 25% crit rate. But yes, do it without Tulu for a minute. Well, we can safely assume that we're going to play her card during a fight, since we do need the Alamus charge. So that's going to be 35% crit rate. And then we add the 20% we've already discussed on top of that. That is 55%. So right now, about half the time we're critting. Well, there are two covenants in this game. April Praise, which at the start of a fight, you're going to have 35% crit rate. And this is something a lot of players already have built. And also, for a unit that's just trying to one-shot everything, is really good. However, there's actually a better covenant for here. But keep in mind, right now, 55%, 35%. Add those together, what do we get? 90%. So already we have 90% crit rate. So with that 90% crit rate, that last 10% is solved very quickly with either a strike or a defense from Vortici herself, because as we discussed earlier, and I will pull it up real fast, her Enlighten 2 means that those give bonus crit rate. So that's 100% crit rate already, and we haven't literally built any crit rate onto our team. So it just is naturally that easy to build up the crit rate. However, like I said earlier, I think there is a better covenant for her. And this is a very minimally used covenant. You've only ever seen this on 2 units in the past, which are Songa and Sorel. This covenant is called Ring of Chamber 36, sorry. And what it does is, at the small cost of increasing the key flare cap by 200, which means increases the first posse of the game's cost by 200. In Astral Rant, I believe that is just the equivalent of having posse twice already. It's going to be annoying, but not something that you have to worry too much about. It's just going to become obnoxious, generally speaking, but definitely not a game breaker. But in exchange, we get an increase of the Exalt's crit rate and crit damage. So, as you can see, my covenant actually hasn't been built yet. But I do plan on building a super covenant for her based off this. That's basically maximum damage. Because with the 30% crit rate, it's like the April Praise, which was 35%. Oh, wow. Oops. With the 30% crit rate, you can just say Tulu Exalt, or play her Strike and Defense, which will put you at 95% crit rate. And as I said earlier, in my opinion, 95 is basically 100%. And that is literally, if you don't have any crit rate on the character whatsoever, period. That problem can be instantly solved by just adding like a random crit rate wheel on the character. So like, for example, actually, probably what is going to be a really good best in slot option for budget players, and what is generally a popular one despite what you would think, is Analysis of Death. Because we can recharge the Alamus right away, and increase our crit damage whenever we kill something. I believe this only stacks up 10 times. It's kind of weird that it doesn't mention that in the thing, but this gives us 14% crit. Which means, without even playing cards, we're at like 99%. So, what you originally assumed to be a difficult bar to hit of 100% crit rate off of literally 0 is actually much more achievable than one would think. And then, of course, this is meant to be for Alert 5 content. You know, D-Zone, the hardest content in the game. Which means we do need debuffs. We do need weakness. We do need golem. Okay, you can get away with it in, like, easy story content, but not for endgame. You need the debuffs. And so, as we discussed a little bit earlier, there is Miriam, kind of. But really, in Kara, we have both Thighs and Pikmin have a 2-cost card that apply debuffs. The Lifelike Rend has a chance of pulling a weakness or vuln relic, and sometimes both, if you have the Fantasia stack, however the character works. And the Sacred Blood also gives you choice of weakness or vuln, both of which for 2 turns. And 2 turns is infinitely more than 1 turn. As I mentioned earlier with Corpusant, we have the Ominous for the weakness, and the Exalt for the Vuln. There we go. Immediately solves that problem. And you might think that Voices would be a good option here. And in theory it would be, even with the chamber that increases the Exalt cost. Well, not the Exalt, the posse cost. There is a idea here that you would want to use Voices. But my issue with Voices is that there's another posse in this game called Tiny Wish. Oh, for anyone who doesn't know, Voices is inflicting a turn of weakness and one on the enemy. There's Tiny Wish. And if we're at that point where we're trying to posse, I think we're much more concerned with the fact that we need to charge our Exalt again. Because if we're pausing once, that implies that we're trying to Exalt a second time, and not just the first time of the fight. And so, instinctually, I'm leaning towards using Tiny Wish instead. However, we have not had her own posse release yet. And in general, we might not even need the Tiny Wish thanks to how powerful her kit is potentially. But anyways, that being said, all that to say that you really, really, really want a debuffer on the team, a Murphy or a Corpo for like our actual blue units, for example, the Pikmin or the Thighs. In Ultra, we have Horla is one of the best debuffers in the game, really, because she just has it for super cheap and efficiently. And then Winkle actually does have a 2 cost for a turn of weakness, which is pretty cool, and is already a unit that you're considering for the team. And so, what have we discussed so far? I want to just go over a brief overview of what we all discussed. So, basically what I've mentioned is that Vortici is very good at charging an Exalt and for dishing out high damage with the Exalt. But she is a Divine Realm A-Core unit, which means she can only do that burst once every 3 turns. And so what do we do for the other set of turns? And also we also technically need time to set it up sometimes. So we need to worry about sustain and shielding. That is basically the second biggest concern for the unit. There is one concern that trumps that I will get to later, but that is the second biggest concern for the unit. And so how do we solve that? Well, the Divine Realm does give you a very large shield. So I think for a lot of players who don't have a core very invested, it's 800 shield off the white stance. So 800 shield, while is not enough to block everything, will do a significant amount of blocking duty for a single turn. And because we're scaling up so much Realm Mastery in the team, we just want to stack a ton of Realm Mastery in general, it will be higher. It will be closer to 1,000 shield. And so she should be, in theory, because obviously I haven't tested her numbers yet, be able to block at least a single turn very easily. Since we're trying to kill very fast in general, but mostly mob fights, that should be enough for that. But elites and bosses don't die in a single burst, usually, right? Maybe she's so good that she actually does do 500k damage in a single Exalt. I'm hoping that's going to be the case, because if she does 100,000 damage base and then 300,000 with the Exalt, it does mean she just one-shots elites. And being able to just one-shot elites truly is a little game-breaking. But anyways. So for Stain, Corposant actually is a solid shielder. I keep bringing up Corposant because Corposant is just proving herself to be a very strong supportive unit for this team. She's normally a mediocre sub-DPS, but in this team she really can shine with her role as a Warden. And also I just want to point out with Vortex's numbers real fast. I believe these are her numbers at level 60. Because that's usually what they do it, is like level 60 with Abyssal Forge levels and stuff. They are like competing with Coruscant right now, right? It's the con's a bit less than at my plus 12 level 80. And then the attack is actually way higher and the defense is way lower, which is normal because she's like burst DPS. So I just wanted you to like keep that in mind. But anyways, Coruscant actually does do some solid shielding. So it scales with her death resistance, but her shield on her Exalt at max level is like 153, so it can go up to like 200 very easily, especially with Soulforce Balance. And her pilots give like 60 base with like this type of level in Soulforge. I think mine give around like 80 right now, 80 maybe up to 90. So that doesn't block everything. And obviously you have to use the Exalt, which you don't really want to use, but that is not any number to scoff at. That is a notable amount of shielding. But in A-Core we have a much better shielder, and that is Murphy. And that is pretty significant shielding from Murphy, because just look at these numbers. Also, man, I feel so bad that I didn't turn the thing off earlier, but this Divine Maiden is normally giving like 200 shield. So that 0 cost that gives us Aerith is something that we already want to do. Play a 0 cost that gives us Aerith. It's giving us a ton of shield. Her Vortex applies weakness. That's something we want to do. Apply weakness to reduce the damage. And then her Exalt cuts all enemy damage in half. Oh my lord, she blocks so much damage. She turns fucking 1400 into 700. And if you're in endgame, you can block 700 damage usually. And then it also gives you a ton of shield. So this girl, if you have her on your team, shielding when you can Exalt with her will not be a problem. And it is possible to Exalt with her very easily. And so because we care about shielding so much and we're so limited on the shielding, I do want to bring up one specific thing, which is Memory Spiral. Memory Spiral is not a low wheel. And so theoretically this is really good. Because in theory we can just like have a real master wheel, which we already want. That's going to give us a ton of shielding that will help solve like sustain issues. But when you look at the numbers and you look at what endgame enemies do, you realize this doesn't really help much. Because the problem with this wheel is that we don't have anyone that's generating like 1,000 shield a turn. We generate these in like bursts and spurts, not as sustained shielding. And so we're just gonna use the shielding when we need it, and then lose it all because we're taking all the damage onto the shields. And so this actually is never gonna retain any shielding for us. So while it's a consideration, I don't actually think it works. And there's another issue in the team building section when I get to it. But I honestly don't think there's any room on the team for the wheel. Like, I think when I like actually build all the Theorycrafted teams, which I will like be building them with you, except for one I've already built somewhat. I don't think we actually can use them. Oh, and a thing I forgot to mention with Coruscant is that, like I said, normally she's a sub DPS. And so people like to hold on to the lightnings. You don't really have to worry about that in this comp, which I think is really cool. You don't have to worry about the pilots for scaling because the strength scaling is not good enough. And then the lightnings generate 2 pilots, and you can just use that. And so if you use, and so that's like plus 100 shielding, like 150 shielding from casting lightnings. Now, lightning's base cost is 4, so it can be expensive just to play them for shielding. But it depends on how the fighting is going. So but it's definitely an option. Plus her Rouse is actually really good. Obviously you don't want a Rouser in Astral Rain. Like my content is suited towards E-Tide, right? Because in story, it's a whole different ball game. You can just play whatever you want. It'll work. You don't have to worry about like any team limitations, restrictions, all that. So when we're talking about endgame, we're talking about E-Tide. But it gives you two pilots, and also you get a bonus bit of shield when you transform. And cool thing about Corpo in Divine Realm is that because this is on a 3-turn cooldown, it perfectly aligns with the other things. So everything that's on a 3-turn cooldown is actually kind of really cool in Divine Realm. Now, so that I think leads me to the final question before I start getting to the teams. Do I think Vortici, do I think our girl right here is a good unit? Do I think this pile of text is builds a viable kit? And my final answer to that on you is I don't actually know. Spoiler alert, the reason why this girl has been in my mind since I woke up today is because I don't actually know how good she is. I think she's going to break the meta. I think she is going to be technically a better unit than G Murphy, because G Murphy is really restrictive in her team, which is, you know, it's 3 teammates that a lot of players consider useless, and so she's really strong in that sense. But what I like about this character is that there's so much potential with who you can pair her up with. And I think she's going to, like, cause a complete meta shakeup because of that. Because everyone is going to be, like, you know, people are going to be like, how do I fit Vortici? How do I make her work with, like, all these other units I have access to? You know, it's really cool in that sense. So, anyways, how am I going to make Vortici work, right? How am I going to play Vortici? Well, oh, yeah, anyways. So, I forgot to say why, though, which is silly to me. This character is the most feast or famine they've ever released in the game. It's a character who is entirely reliant on her Exalt being able to actually kill in one shot and do a ton of damage. Basically the same concept as Dorasane. Except for Dorasane, Exalt costs 100 Alamus to charge. Vortici Exalt costs 200. So, while Dorasane has the potential of scaling with all the strengths and stuff, she is very front-loaded. She's all like Mushen in that sense, where it's if you are not killing at the beginning of the fight, or at least dishing out significant damage, if you're not able to do a lot of damage at the beginning, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to do a lot of damage late. Versus Dorasane, who actually is a scaling unit, weirdly enough. And so, that is my concern and worry for her, is that it turns out these numbers don't end up being like 100k damage, but in reality end up being like 10k damage. It means the unit is going to be borderline unplayable. It means she's actually just going to be D or even F tier. Like, she's going to be comparable. People are going to compare her to Arita with how weak she is, or Songa, for example. And that would be really unfortunate. I'll be very sad and disappointed. But, on a brighter note, if she is good, if she is strong, I think she's the strongest, not the strongest unit in the game, but like one of them. I think if she's good, then she is like G Murphy level good. I think she's like Kath level good if she's good. Because while her sustain sucks, her burst is absurd. Like, her burst is extremely high. Like, I think she's definitely a better unit than like Doris and Sorel, right? I think you, in my personal opinion, Kath ends up being better because of the whole sustain aspect. I think G Murphy ends up being better because of the sustain aspect. I think Mouchette ends up being better because Mouchette can be ran with like 3 level 1 units and kill everything anyways because she's just that strong. But like, I think she's better than Ella, who is considered a meta unit because she can dish out like millions of damage, but you require like the best units in the game to support her in the process. And, you know, stuff like that. I think she's better than Tawil and 24 in what she's capable of. And I play those units as part of my main teams. But, okay, that's the theory part done of the video. That's a nice, pleasant hour of me rambling about why I think the character is good. Let's get to the fun part. Let's build some teams. So, sorry, wrong team. There we go. This is the first team I came up with. This is basically a redux of Corpina of discard. That's why Arita is here. 1, to be filler for our girl Vortici, because I closed the Vortici picture. Okay. Going up. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't reveal anything personal there. Oh well. There we go. This is what the team looks like. Boop. Right. This is our team that we're working with here. And so the wheel is obviously, the spare wheel is obviously going to be a Vortici wheel. It's actually kind of annoying for me, specifically, that I don't have both of these, that I don't have either of them maxed out, because I don't have enough pulls for Vortici's wheel to get plus 12. I don't have the Crimson, the Bloody Feast is what it's called, actually. I don't have that one at plus 12 right now either, but this is current setup that I'm going to be running personally. And why am I running this setup? And, oh yeah, I think I'm going to end up running G Ramona in this version. If I can find her. So why am I going to run this Vortici team? Well, it is because I like Tulu for damage. And for the tentacle. I think Tulu gives me the option of early damage turns, early burst turns. Thanks to his Exalt. His Exalt's really easy to charge because I gave him the Sovereign. And so he Exalts. I get a Tentacle. I can Red Stance then, and then I can Vortici Exalt. And in my mind, that kills everything. I have Corpusant for longer fights, or for harder fights, for stronger enemies, right? And the Blade was actually a relic from a different team comp. I'm actually going to have to swap some stuff around. She doesn't need the Blade. Probably going to run Death of Miss Coral, maybe. Because, yeah, seems good. But, Blade, but, yeah, so she carries the Dreams, because you really don't care about Vortici cards too much. Like, yes, you do want to play the card, but you're not reliant on the card. And there's a difference there. There's already you wanting to play a card one time and wanting to play it 2 times, you know? So that way it gives me the double weakness. And so that solves another problem. The rest is, like, you know, pretty basic stuff. Like, I care about hand size in general. I have the hand size wheel available. I don't think this team actually is reliant on hand size, as opposed to most of the other team comps in the game. But so that is why I personally running it, but I don't think anyone else is really going to run it. But yeah, it's Corpusant Shielder, Tulu, Exalt, and then Ramona for Keyflare. Because I want to keep the teams pure, right? For me, it's all about pure chaos. If you look at this, it's pure chaos team. Pure Acorn team. Pure Acorn team, Pure Acorn team, Pure Acorn team, Pure Acorn team, Pure Acorn team. And I do need to rename these at some point, but whatever. As you know, and annoying, and I would be running Murphy, actually, in this team. Probably over the Ramona, except for that I'm already using Murphy in Cath. I think you run her over either Corpo or Ramona, but over Ramona makes more sense to me because it's just, you know, better sustain, better stall. Ramona is really only here to help with that 3-cost card, as I mentioned earlier. And so this is going to be my team. This is, like, the budget I'm working with, basically, is, like, how do I avoid stepping on any other team's toes to play this unit? So, but that's not going to be the case for everyone else. Everyone else has, like, their own situations, their own shenanigans. For example, some people only have Enlightened 3G Murphy. Well, if that's the case, then their team is probably going to look something like... I'll just use Arita as the Vortici shoe-in for everything. But something like this, for example. You have Murphy as a Keyflare bot. And what this does is that you have access to the Abyss and the 3 costs. Actually, no. We're being silly here. You still put Dreams on Murphy because you have the other one for Life Drain. But you're looking at something like this, for example. You have Murphy, who is here to give you the waltzes that you're going to play to get the tentacles. and also increase tentacle strength, which means you're increasing tentacle damage, which means you're increasing the multiplier for the exalt damage. And with the advantage of this comp is that if the fight is going long, you do have the Murphy exalt for sacrifice as a percentage of the damage you deal. And so, I mean, maybe that's just enough to push, you know? You get a percentage of the damage you deal as sacrifice damage, you do this big burst, and suddenly you have like a tiny burst the next turn when you're not even dealing any damage, you're shielding because of the sacrifice. Seems pretty neat to me. And then I just threw Celeste in randomly because, hey, you need a unit, and that was the first one I saw, and she's really good for sustain, for example. You know, if you are worried about dying, because that's the big weakness of Acor, right? Especially Divine Realm Acors, that's the same. Well, if you're worried about dying, a unit that gives you shielding is pretty good. And so this comp is designed to be a bit slower, but takes the fight a bit longer, but also it can cycle through your deck really easily because double Abyss him. So that way, it doesn't really matter if we are theoretically taking a little longer because that extra turn that we're taking is blocked by, say, Murphy Exalt, and also being used to play the 3-cost card on Vortex that charges 75 Alamus, and then the 35% crit rate. It's a lot of words at once. But yeah, so this is an idea, right? And this is going to drive me mad. Change it quickly in time, but it's going to drive me mad if I don't like do this the way I want it to. So, bop, bop, and then bop, bop. This way the Murphys are right next to each other, because otherwise it's annoying me, and then I always like the GPS on the left. This is just like a personal bit of OCD right now. Anyways, so that's a pure variant. Reason why this doesn't work for me, but can work for a lot of, I would almost recommend to other players, because this doesn't really step on anyone's toes, right? Most players aren't using Celeste. Most players aren't using Acor in general, right? Most people aren't using Murphy. Murphy Celeste are just like two of the best stalling units in the game. They're very good at tanking, very good at slowing the enemy's plays down. And then Phoborn is just a good support. She's just very strong support at Enlightened 3, right? This assumes that you don't have a Overexalt G Murphy that you can use to just solo carry content. Because otherwise you would just be playing that. Like, anyone who has a Overexalt G Murphy plays her with Overexalt, but there are players that don't. And so you could be one of those players, and you could use, say, this type of team. So that's really cool, actually. Because this is a team that doesn't require any Overexalts. Celeste Overexalt does not matter, Murphy Overexalt doesn't matter, and as we discussed, neither does Vortici or G Murphy. And so, that's one of the pure variants. We could do another, and I put away my notebook. Annoying. But, just call this, like, Tawil, right? So, I'm just going to call this the Tawil variant. Because this is, in theory, a team in and of itself. And Tawil is basically on cleanup duty. So, this D-Zone, for example, has a wave. The wave 4 fight has a team that looks like this. This. Yeah. And the concept for the team... And the concept here is that Low-10 Overexalt does a percentage of fixed max HP damage, and it just does 90% of the boss's HP in 3 turns. And then the Tawil basically does clean up. Tawil does clean up Tawil carries the elite fights and does clean up on the boss for wave 4. This team comp is a very similar concept, where you just have a Tawil on the team that's like a solid supportive unit in general. She can do a lot and be like a bit of a cleanup. And you have the Hamlin and Riker, who are also very strong support units. And I'm not saying you should run them all 3 together, right? This is just a first concept draft. Because I was thinking about it all day, and like there's just so many units that are potentially good, and a lot of them are just generic good limited supports. But Riker has Vuln and Draw, so you can draw your 3-cost card. Hamlin has all those cost reducing and like card doubling effects, so again, using it on the 3 costs. And then Tawil just does cleanup duty. She has the wings that do a bit of damage and give you a bit of strength, which will increase your damage. And she also can discover cards. She can discover Vortice. She can discover Chosens to charge up our girl. Like, when you play Tawil as support, she actually can be a decent support if you have the correct teammates to make it even worth it. So there's another concept, and this one's a bit more flexible. Obviously that's like an option consideration. But if we want to move out of pure, right? Well, then we just have like generic good stuff going on, right? So we have this. And I'm not saying you need this to win, right? What I'm saying is you can run any combination of this when it comes to Karo, right? So you run either the pigment or the thighs, or both, if you really, really wanted to. And you can run the Aegis. It's not necessary, right? But like in theory, a comp that I would run, for example, if I want to be like really strong, is like this. Or maybe have Corpusant in that slot, or Murphy in that slot, right? It doesn't really matter too much, but like this to me is a very powerful comp. Why? Well, we have the two that are going to increase the damage, give us the tentacle, do all that bullshit. And then we have the thighs and the Aegis, right? Thighs solves any Alamus problem with the card Exalt duplicating effect, with the embryos she generates, with the weak. She solves our debuff problem, and then Aegis is like one of the most broken units in the game. She petrifies the enemy. So, what's our problem? We're trying to burst quickly, and we need like an extra turn. Well, we have the Divine Stance for one turn, and then we have the Aegis Exalt for another free turn. So that's basically 2 free turns, and any comp that can't get something out of 2 free turns in a fight is just not really a comp that you should be running in endgame. The only comps that like don't exist off of 2 free turns, quote unquote, are stall comps, and that's because the whole concept of stall comp is to make every turn free. So you know. But yeah, so like, but for the average player, this is like, oh, what do you mean you want me to run thighs and Aegis and all that in a single comp? I can't afford that. Okay, fine. We'll run Pigment over thighs then. And you're like, well, we're still running the Aegis. Okay, we'll run the Feint then. You see, it's very flexible. That's what I like. I like teammates and units that have flexibility, because I think that's really cool. And you're like, well, even this is too good, because I like Feint. I think Feint's a really powerful unit. And, you know, because the average person who doesn't play Acor is going to say stuff like that, because, well, I mean, it's true, right? For me, any unit in this color is basically expendable, because I don't ever play with them, but other players is different. So, like, you're like, okay. Then this team, right? This is a very similar concept, very similar ideal, and there are so few players in this game that are going to be like, but my Celeste and Tulu. It's like, no, people don't really use Celeste or Tulu that often. Tulu is played in, like, Lemurian more than anything else, but my ideal for a Lemurian team is this. I don't even think you run Tulu in an ideal Lemurian team, so here's another team comp that totally works, totally viable, totally strong. And I'll just like pull up one last combination, this time with everyone's favorite color, LOL Ultra. You know, this works, right? Because Horla is debuffs. And, you know, the final damage multiplier, but more final damage is nice. You can get the plus 20% on the plus 40%. I believe that stacks additively, so that's just a 60% damage multiplier on your Exalt. That's a lot of damage, man. You can probably go up to like 100% damage multiplier with like correct effects, but I don't really remember all the effects in this game to do it like that. And also, I'm going to apologize now for the energy having wound down so much. I'm just really tired, man. This is so interesting to me, but I have exhausted like all my faculties to create this. But that being said, the reason why we care about Clem, the reason why we care about Aegis and the other teams or stuff like that, and
honestly why this team might be a bit the weaker combinations, is that we do need a Keyflare bot. Especially if we're planning on running the Ring of Chamber with the Keyflare cap stuff. Keyflare is really important. So having a Keyflare naturally scaling unit, like Clementine, for example, like Ramona, like Tawil, like, all that, very significant to carry your life drain. I don't know if it's going to be mandatory yet, but I would argue that it probably is mandatory if you. It's at least ideal. And so there we go. This is an ultra team combination. This is just an ultra team. So if you don't really use ultra units a lot, which I know I'm talking to like no one here because like people don't have these units for you, right? But if you do somehow, then this is an option. But okay, sure. I will acknowledge that this team doesn't work because the units are too good. That is fine. We just run this. Right? You at worst, for the average player, what this character does means is that you take apart your worst team or one of your worst teams in the Corpita comp, in the Disco comp, and you're replacing it with a unit that is potentially meta breaking, game breaking. Now, obviously, this is theory crafting. Like, I don't have the numbers of like what her stuff does actually in game in front of me. All I know is that this is what I'm looking at as what I think it will be an ideal. I still don't know if I want G Ramona or Ramona. I'm gonna try with Ramona as on day one. This is what I'm looking at, and I look at this and I'm thinking, yes, this is gonna end up being one of my best teams, and I think it's really cool that there are so many options that we can use to present with this character, and I think it's really cool what they did. So I think this unit, this kit, and this wheel are all something I'm super excited for. I can't wait to pull them to max them out. And overall, it's really cool that we're getting another carry DPS in A-Core. So all that to be said, I hope you all had fun. I'm glad you could forgive my ramblings. I'm super happy to see that you all made it to the end of the video. I hope you're all doing well. See y'all later.